My watches say 7:30. We'll start off with a little nigun. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Where are you? Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Oh, good. Wonderful, wonderful. And of course, Shabbat Shalom to everybody who is joining us online as well as in person. And so friends who are here, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here online as well. We don't exist without you, of course. Rabbi Rachel Miller here with me and myself, the other Rabbi Rachel Miller, flying solo tonight. So under your chair, you will have our Mishkan Tefillah. There are 2 blue books under your chair. The one that says Torah is not Mishkan Tefillah. Per CDC guidelines, you guys are already doing a great job. We ask that you keep your mask over your mouth and nose throughout our service to keep everybody safe. If you need to head out of the sanctuary, you can do so over that way. You can do so over that way. Or there's also this door at the back as well. Take a second, if you haven't, make sure your cell phone is on silent or off or buzzing. Although even buzzing, you might want to just put it all the way off. Just give yourself this hour separated from your device. Also smartwatches too. And friends, we're like far enough that it's going to work and close enough that it's also going to work. Turn to somebody that you did not drive here with. Wish them a Shabbat Shalom. Folks on Facebook, go into that chat and wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Friends, let's take a moment to fully enter our space, leave behind all of the moving parts that were a part of your week, and let's just be in the space. So find a comfy way to sit in your chair, perhaps getting your feet on the floor, flutter your eyes closed. And with these 3 breaths, we will leave behind that week that was and enter Shabbat. Deep breath in. Let it out. This next breath, we're holding all of the things that held us up this week. Deep breath in. Let it out. And this final Shabbat, final breath, we release it all to enter Shabbat. Deep breath in. and we let it out. Flutter our eyes open, and I'll invite you to turn to page 120 for our candle blessing. And if you will, please rise. Bring in that love and light and warmth of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. If you'd like to light your own Shabbat candles, I will invite you to do so here in front of the Bima as we pray the words of Shalom Aleichem, welcoming the Sabbath angels to be with us this Shabbat, page 142. And if you're not lighting candles, you can feel free to have a seat. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu, Tzidchem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Kadosh Baruch Hu. On page 138, turning back just a little bit in our prayer book, we have L'Chadodi, our prayer where we get to welcome the Sabbath bride. We imagine in our minds the most beautiful image that we can, and we ask that it comes toward us so that it can help us to greet Shabbat, to greet this Sabbath bride. L'Chadodi, page 138. L'Chadodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'nibur echad, Emanu-El hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'Shem tiferet v'letila. L'Chadodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'Chadodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki mekor ha-beracha, merosh miketem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. L'Chadodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nekabela. לחדותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לחדותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדותי לקראת כלה, p'nei Shabbat nekabela. We rise and face the door. Ba'oi v'shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha u'v'tzola, toch emunei am segula. Ba'oi chala, לחדותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Page 146 will remain standing for our Baruch Hu. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Yai la lai 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 lai. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. HaMevorach, HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Friends, I'll invite you to turn to the back cover of your inside cover of your prayer book. If you haven't been with us in a little bit, we have the words for our Ma'ariv Aravim, Roll into Dark, stickered right back there for you. Roll into dark, roll into night, night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Boreyom balayla, golel or mipnei choshech, golel or mipnei choshech, bechoshech mipnei or. Roll into dark, roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. If you'd like the words Shema, page 152. We feel our feet on the floor. Perhaps we flutter our eyes closed as we declare God's oneness with love. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated. On page 154, we find our prayer, the Ve'ahavta. It is a prayer that asks us to pay attention, to be proud of why we're Jewish, to go out from our homes and to spread that Judaism through the way that we are in the world, to just be good people, to just be a good person, to be that helper. It's Zohara's favorite word right now. She's really good at her P's, and so I ask her to be a helper, and she says, helper, and then she helps. And so sometimes we have to be reminded about the identities that that God is asking us to hold on to, that sometimes we need to be told, hey, you're the helper right now. And I feel like Ve'ahavta is oftentimes that reminder. We'll chant together. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha v'nibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Friends, we are a story people. Everyone has at least one family member who is the expert storyteller. Is anybody in the room? Is anybody in the kahal? Is anybody that person in your family? Are you the expert storyteller? Robert, we know. We all know. You are. And so this isn't rhetorical. What makes a good storyteller? A good story, fair, but I've heard a lot of people tell really good stories really boring. But a good story definitely helps. What else? What helps makes a good storyteller? Enthusiasm, emotion, exactly. Thank you. What else? A good sense of timing does not hurt. Very good. And Mark, right? Back to your point about a good story. It helps when the story has a point. That makes it a good story. Sometimes a little conflict in there. That helps us to have a good story. But like everybody has said, we have to speak with emotion. You want to keep it a little simple. You want to keep it truthful and real and meaningful to share. These are the things that make a really good story. And I'm most drawn into a story when the storyteller has me sitting on the edge of my seat with every word. When I begin to feel the story with my whole body. I empathize with a character or even laugh so hard my whole body giggles. Stories are powerful when they do something to us that allows us to remember them. Perhaps the most famous story of our people is that of our Exodus, the drama of God trying to free the Israelites from Pharaoh, the plagues that follow, and the majestic splitting of the sea for their ultimate escape. In our Torah portion this week, Parshat Bo, we are in the middle of this story. We're in the plagues, and it's also the time when we receive our instructions to become storytellers. We receive these instructions when God commands the Israelites to explain to their children how God took them out of Egypt. Imagine being that first-generation storyteller. When the Israelites braced to leave Egypt, we can only imagine their feelings. Truly, we can only imagine what they may have felt like. So in today's world, we imagine how their story still applies to the Jewish people and, of course, to others who are still facing those same modern-day enslavements. And so we think about, some of the times where we may have felt like we were stuck in Egypt. So you have the mundane example of, I've never been freed from Egypt, but I know what it feels like to be trapped on a plane on the tarmac and to finally hear that pilot say that he or she is ready to lead us to our destination. And then we have the more intense experiences of our modern ancestors. I've never been freed from Egypt, but my grandparents or great-grandparents told me what it was like to be liberated from Auschwitz. The Torah commands us to tell the story of the Exodus. The Torah commands us to remember and recite the words of the Exodus. Our commandment to tell stories is then paired with God's command to add a physical, tangible element. God says, "And this shall serve you as a sign on your hand, as a reminder between your eyes, in order that the teaching of Adonai may be in your mouth, that with a mighty hand God freed you from Egypt." And so rabbinic literature, it interpreted this to mean that literally these words, the story of the Exodus, a little part of it, would be inscribed on parchment, put into a box, and worn during prayer as tefillin. And so the tefillin are those boxes that you'll see on folks' arms and on their forehead in the wrap, sometimes in the morning when they're praying. And this commandment, it signals that remembering Passover is more than an annual thought. It should be at the forefront of our minds, even physically, every day. And I believe that a framework like this, that we're calling a story and using a physical element on our body as a part of that reminder, that it demonstrates to us that the trauma and the triumphs of our bodies exist simultaneously with our sacred texts. The Israelites, they went through the trauma of the Exodus and journeying in the wilderness. And our physical bodies are here today with the history of those traumas and others, and then we are physically wrapped in the story. And there are other ways that we physically engage with the stories of our people besides tefillin, from marching the Torah scroll around the sanctuary, to wearing Jewish symbols, hanging and acknowledging mezuzot on our doors, or immersing in the mikveh. Judaism provides us with lots of physical reminders to keep us engaged with our sacred texts and the stories of our people. Now, today, we are in what some consider to be the first global mass trauma in decades. So as defined by Dr. David Trickey of the UK's Trauma Council, trauma can be understood as a rupture in meaning-making. That is the way you understand yourself, the way you see the world, and the way you see other people. These outlooks are shocked and overturned by an event, causing a gap to arise between your orienting systems and that event. Put differently, simple stress cascades into trauma, often mediated through sustained and severe feelings of helplessness. It's the transition from, wow, it's stressful to figure out childcare during the first 3 weeks of lockdown, to the fact that we're almost 2 years into the pandemic and many folks still feel helpless in this regard. It's the transition from, if I stay home, I'll stay safe, to being 2 years into some folks only leaving the house to see the doctor or have groceries put into the trunk of their car. It's the transition from enjoying the first few months of creative virtual gatherings to wanting nothing more than to hug and embrace our family and friends who may live far away. Torah provides us with a framework that we can use to respond to the collective trauma that we have experienced. God could have commanded the Israelites to forget the collective trauma of the Exodus. That's a powerful thing to think about. That God could have said, and when I take you out of Egypt, you will never again think about your time there. You will forget your time in slavery. You will not commemorate this moment, but rather, you're going to begin again today. God didn't ask that. Instead, God not only asked, but commanded us to remember fervently the day we went free from Egypt. And then that teaching goes on to be the basis for many teachings as to why we shall not wrong or oppress the stranger, because we knew what it meant to be slaves in Egypt. And for us today, our collective trauma surrounding the pandemic, it'll continue to manifest and ebb and flow. The trauma affects our bodies, it affects our minds, it affects our spirits. But Judaism gives us a way to process our path toward management and perhaps even healing. For the collective trauma of the Israelites, it was to tell and retell the story of the Exodus from one generation to the next, and to carry literally the words with us along the way. Our ancestors' movement through the trauma was not a perfectly paved path. They made mistakes along the way. They had to talk things through, and they came up with rituals to ground their community as they tried to cope and then live within their new reality. Their mistakes were recorded in the ways in which they disobeyed God's commandments. And when we study these stories, many of the mistakes came about as a coping mechanism for fear of the unknown. Think about the golden calf. The Israelites felt abandoned, and though they were told by Moses that, I'm going to go up to God and I'll be back, I'll come back down, time continued to pass without a word or a sign of hope, and they gave up. They lost hope. And in hindsight, they can look back and see why this was a mistake. But in the moment, they felt they were doing the right thing. And we too will make mistakes as we navigate our collective trauma of the pandemic. We too will have moments when we lose hope. We will put someone at risk because we're just done with all these rules and masking. We will be unkind to someone who has fallen behind in work because of family stressors caused by isolation and quarantine. We will snap at our loved ones because we are just overstressed, overtired, or overworked. But our tradition tells us that the biggest mistake would be for us to try to forget or ignore the impact of the pandemic and how it has affected our lives. Like our ancestors before us, not only should we seek to learn from and retell the stories of our trauma, but so too should we find ways to physically ritualize our path forward. because in doing so, we provide ourselves with hope for new beginnings, hope for change, hope for reaching the next day, hope for that next milestone or holiday. And so to overcome their mistakes, the Israelites ritualized their path forward through offering sacrifices to God, setting up systems to transition from impure to pure, and by retelling stories as a warning to not make the same mistakes. Through individual and communal acts, the Israelites were able to put one foot in front of the other. This is our job as well. We can use the framework of our ancestors' choices, and that framework can help to guide us. So like the Israelites, we can ritualize our path forward as individuals and as a community. We can ground ourselves in things like weekly challah preparation for our Shabbat tables, so that the smell of the dough fills our home each week, and we look forward to that smell each week. We can mark our calendars for dates that we will come in person to synagogue to pray with our community. We can add a new practice to our Jewish routine that allows us to mark each day, such as reciting the Shema before bed. Like the Israelites, we can put into place systems that help us to transition from impure to pure. Science has put into place the transition periods for isolation and quarantine, but we make it a Jewish experience when we pause at the end of our isolation to say a prayer, to thank God for making it to this new moment in time. Like the Israelites, we can tell our stories. We can acknowledge the errors we have made and raise up the resiliency that we have shown. We can praise the innovation we were forced to unleash, and we can inspire others when times get tough again. We are the storytellers of collective trauma. From the exodus out of Egypt in ancient times to today's global pandemic, we will continue to learn from the stories of our past and to write stories for our future. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. Shabbat Shalom. And so, friends, as we think about what it feels like to make an exodus, we will do that with joy and gusto. As we pray together these words of Micha Mocha, our prayer for freedom, on page 158. Yai lai 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 la 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 yai lai 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 la 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 yai lai 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 la 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai Micha mocha ne'etar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osei fele Nora tehilot osei fele Malchutecha ra'u banecha Hokei hayam mifnei Moshe u'Miriam Ze'elianu ve'amru Ze'elianu ve'ameru Adonai imo le'olamvad Adonai imo le'olam vad Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai Micha mocha ne'etar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osei fele Nora tehilot osei fele V'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov Golom yad chazak mimenu Baruch Ata Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. On page 161, Let's pray together at the bottom of the page these words of Hashkivenu, where we call out to God for that Sukkot Shalom, that shelter of peace. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haparei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. On page 162, you will find our prayer for Shabbat V'Shamru, this prayer that we only get to say on Shabbat. And it becomes one of those prayers that's a marker that, especially little kids, they always look forward to Vishamru because they get to do, that whole thing. And it makes it special. It's something that you can't do the rest of the week. It's one of those pieces that helps to push us forward to just get to that next Shabbat. And Shabbat can be that rhythm to our life. Vishamru, page 162. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam, oti le'olam, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Friends, we'll turn to page 164. I'll invite everybody to please rise for our central standing prayer, our Amidah, connecting us to generations past and generations yet to be. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevi ge'ula livnei v'neihem, lema'an shemo b'ahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, magen Avraham v'ezrat Sarah, atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol atarav lehoshia, Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, Mechakel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye Hakol Berachamim Rabim, Samech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Micha Mocha Bal Gevurot, Umido Melech, Melech Mimit Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman Atala Chayot HaKol, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mechaye HaKol. Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, Ukdoshim B'chol Yom Yahaylu Chasala, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Take a few moments for silent prayer and meditation, whether it's the words continuing of our Amidah or the prayers of your heart. When you have completed your prayers, I'll invite you to please be seated. Page 178. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom rahav Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom rahav Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. a few announcements. Really just one. Shameless plug for my class starting this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. And it's only going to be Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. There's no Wednesday class this time. And I'm teaching about Neo-Chassidut. So if you've ever wondered about Hasidism and how it may or may not be able to play a role in your life, or you just like Jewish history and also want to learn about that, then this is definitely the class for you. And also starting in 3 or 4 days is our Green Week. So this is Temple Emanu-El's extra special week where although we are greening all the time, this is when we are especially paying attention to it, and we have some fabulous speakers that you'll be able to hear from both in person and online. And it'll culminate on Tu B'Shvat, which happens to coincide with Martin Luther King Jr. Day. There will be a tree planting at Brook Run Park on Monday. So I hope you'll be able to join us either for a class on Chassidut or something green in the coming week. And so, friends, my favorite part of services, I would love to hear the good things that are going on in your lives. B'nai Mitzvah families, if you are a B'nai Mitzvah student and you are online, now is a great time to tell us that you are here by sharing with us one of the things that you are thankful for this week. But from the Kahal, anybody, we're not doing the microphone passing anymore, so I'll just repeat it again for everybody online. But if you have something, I saw a twitch, yes. You're settling into a new job? Wonderful, mazal tov, mazal tov. Being shy today? Nothing good? Yes, Rick. Oh, keep your mask on.
So I had a
Rick.
birthday where both numbers changed, but I spent it in the beautiful city of Barcelona, Spain. What a great place.
Mazel tov, a wonderful trip and birthday with Spain. Perfect, love it. Anything else lovely and wonderful in our lives? Okay, I'll go. Rabbi Rachel. One of the wonderful things going on in my life is that I love that I'm back to work, and that means back to work means that I had a fabulous time visiting my parents with Max and Zohara in Park City. We got in some good skiing, and we look forward to some fresh powder again soon. So from skiing to new jobs and travel, let's join together in Shechianu, thanking God for reaching this day, page 648. Hold that thought. You never have time to get to that page, but I'm giving you time tonight. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'acheyanu v'kimanu v'hekiyanu lazman hazeh. And though we have, even though I know you all have good things, even though you didn't share it, even when we have all of these good things, we are complex humans who hold many emotions at the same time. And so we can sit in our joys and we can sit in our oys, and we know that we have some friends of the congregation who are sitting in a little more of those oys lately and are in need of healing of mind, of body, of spirit, of relationship. And so we are especially praying for the healing of Ellen Young, Stuart Young, Sandy Geller, Pesha Rachel, Bruce Mencher, Brett Stamsky, Meir ben Rachmiel Vadina, Yeda bat Yosef Levi Miriam, Ashish Sharma, Chavayeda bat Yehudit, Samuel Felsenfeld, Jack Felsenfeld, Howard Ackerman, Ken Schiffer, Helen Ray, Kathy Cook, Ludmilla Koven, Michelle Lappin, Florence Rosenberg, Nella Kurtzer, Bill Kolbersch, Mark Swirsky, and Although, Mark, you're here, so I think you're doing much better. Yeah. You should have come off. Mazel tov on your full recovery. And Daniel Bronson as well. Friends, if there is somebody in the congregation that you are praying for their healing, I'll invite you to share that name aloud as my eyes meet yours. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Marcia. Thank you. Thank you. So friends, words for Misha Berach can be found on page 371 in the middle of the page. I'll ask that you please rise, and if you are with your pod and would like to wrap an arm around one another, I invite you to do so. And know that I'm sending out my arms, wrapping you as well. Mishe Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishe Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Friends, we will remain standing as we sanctify Shabbat with Kiddush on page 123. Holding too many things. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kinishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. V'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila lamikra'e kodesh. Zecher letziyat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidashta mikol hamim. V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Shabbat Shalom. And once again, we will remain standing as we begin to conclude our service. Aleinu L'Shabeach can be found on the bottom of page 586. Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adon HaChol, L'Teit Gilula L'Yotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu K'Gilyei HaRatzot, V'lo Samanu K'Mishpachot Adama, Shelo Sam Chelkeinu Kahem, V'Goraleinu Kechol Hamonam, V'anachnu Korim, Umishtachavim Umodim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'nemar, v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, echad. Please be seated. We've reached the point in our service where we call to mind the memory of loved ones, those who have died in recent days and those who have died in seasons past. We are especially thinking of the family in Shiva, Shelley's father, John Ken Deline, and for those in a period of Shloshim for Heidi Greenberg and Gilda Jacobson. And to those who are commemorating a yahrzeit, a death anniversary, we remember Bernard Birnbaum, Sylvia Brownstein, Joel Cohen, Maxine Deutsch, Max Eichhorn, Judith Fishman, Aaron Friedman, Alfred Granith, Saul Kahn, Ann Katz, Eleanor Katz, Shirley Kinberg, Herman Kirschner, George Koff, Julius Malcolm Lindy, Ethel Miller-Lippman, Stephen Marcus, Zelda Koblinst-Marmer, Pauline Mokotov, Ada Rosenthal, Doris Rosberg, Alfred Schiff, Munoz Schmid, Abraham Abe Schwartz, Seymour Siegel, Mary Smith, Howard H. Stern, Eileen Ray Tepper, Meyer Weiner, and Gloria Weiss. If there is a name for which I've mispronounced or inadvertently skipped, I invite you to share that name aloud at this time. If you are in the first 30 days mourning the loss of a loved one, I'll invite you to please rise so we may recognize you. If you are in the first year, Yud Bet, mourning the loss of a loved one, I invite you to please rise so we may recognize you. If on this Shabbat you are commemorating a yahrzeit, a death anniversary of a loved one, I invite you to please rise so we may recognize you. And if it is your custom to rise for Mourner's Kaddish, as it is here at Temple Emanu-El, I'll invite you to do so now. The words for Kadisha Tome, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mivarach Le'olam U'almei Amaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei D'Kudesha B'richu. Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata. Tush Bechata V'nechemata. Da'amiran Be'alma V'imru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, say shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru imru amen. Yaseh shalom shalom aleinu Shabbat Shalom, everyone.